How are you?
Hey, Rachel, it's great to see you.
Yeah, great to see you too, and to get to some of the questions that we didn't have a chance to get to during our webinar this month.
I wish part of me wants to do webinars that are several hours long so we can get to all the questions. But I guess this is the next best thing, at least getting to a few of the extra ones that we didn't get to last time.
Exactly. I'm sure our audience would appreciate that too.
I think it would shrink after a while.
Yeah. So we had a lot of questions this month about how Congress could codify abortion rights, but we had one question come in about what might happen if they chose to do the opposite. So this person asked, if Congress passed a law totally banning abortion, would such a law be constitutional?
So just as if Congress were to pass a bill codifying Roe versus Wade, that would be constitutional. By the same token, a future Congress passing a bill that would outlaw abortion would be constitutional as well. But to me, the follow-up question is even more important, which is what is the likelihood of that happening? Now, as you know, Rachel, we've spent a lot of time over the last year and a half talking about the filibuster. And a lot of people we know, primarily Democrats, have become very frustrated because these small Democratic majorities are not able to pass a lot of their legislative priorities because of the filibuster, just as Republicans get frustrated when they have the majority and can't get their priorities through the Senate. So this is one of the reasons that so many Democrats have argued against getting rid of the filibuster, because they say, if we lower the threshold from 60 votes to 51, when Democrats have the majority, then Republicans will be able to pass bills by a 51 vote margin too. So coming back to a bill that would ban abortion, even in a Republican majority, it would have to be a landslide, almost unprecedented in the modern political era, that would allow an abortion ban to survive a Senate filibuster. But if the filibuster were eliminated or suspended, whether to pass an abortion bill or a climate change legislation or anything else, then it's much more likely that something like that could happen. So as long as the filibuster remains in place, the likelihood of that abortion ban passing Congress is almost zero. Without a filibuster, it grows considerably, and it would be constitutional.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dan. So many interesting questions that this issue is bringing up, not only in terms of the Supreme Court, but in terms of, how Congress could continue with their reforms. So very interesting. One other interesting question we received relates to the Hyde Amendment, which, as I'm sure you know, but just in case our audience doesn't, is a legislative provision barring the use of federal funds to pay for abortion, except to save the life of the woman or if a pregnancy arises from incest or rape. So the question we received from our audience was, would opening federal grounds to abortion violate the Hyde Amendment?
So as we talked about on the webinar, I know you remember, Rachel, and I'm sure most of our audience does also, we talked about one of the proposals that Democrats had forwarded that the Biden administration had rejected, the idea of allowing abortions to be performed on federal property, national parks, military installations, that sort of thing. And there are a number of reasons that the Biden administration did not embrace that proposal. Mainly, the main reason was because they were concerned that the doctor or even the woman, while safe on federal property, once they left that military base or that installation and returned to their community in a red state, could be potentially legally vulnerable. But one of the other reasons for that, as you correctly pointed out, or as the questioner correctly asked, is the Hyde Amendment, named after the pro-life congressman from Illinois, Henry Hyde, that passed back in the late 20th century, prohibits the use of federal funds being spent on abortions except in those circumstances. And while Biden administration lawyers have been arguing back and forth whether this would be a violation of that prohibition, there's enough concern about it that it kept the White House from moving forward on this particular proposal. And of course, there's a lot of Democrats who are frustrated with Biden, not just on this particular matter, but on any number of other potential remedies that the Biden administration has not moved toward. So if you didn't see it a couple of days ago, Biden let it be known that he is actually still considering declaring a health emergency in this country after originally rejecting the idea. He hasn't decided to do it, but is now considering it. And I think at least part of that is to send a message to the Democratic base that, in fact, this is an issue about which he cares deeply.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So during our session this month, we also asked our audience about their thoughts on reforming the Supreme Court, either through expansion or term limits. So what are the options for reforming the court by having term limits?
Okay, I feel like the term limits option, and the one that gets talked about most frequently, would be an 18-year limit for justices. I feel like the 18-year term limit is probably the most realistic of the proposals that's being discussed right now. The idea of expanding the size of the court, well, that's something that Franklin Roosevelt tried back in the 1930s and ultimately ended up having to retreat in a fairly embarrassing political defeat. But even if the Democrats went ahead with it and expanded the court from, let's just say, from 9 to 15 justices, well, when Republicans take over Congress, then they'd expand the court too. Then we have 21 justices. Then when Democrats took over Congress, they'd expand it again, and then it would be 50 justices. Soon the Supreme Court would be meeting in the Rose Bowl because there wouldn't be any other structure large enough to hold them all. But I feel like the term limits idea is one that is more plausible. And particularly if it were pegged at 18 years, what that would mean is that every president would have 2 Supreme Court of Justice appointments guaranteed to them in each of their terms in office. So a president who served 1 term would have 2 appointments. A president who served 2 terms would have 4. But I feel like taking the conversation about judicial appointments in a presidential campaign out of the abstract and making it more tangible, in addition to what it might mean for the court, could also make it easier for many voters to weigh these issues when they're hearing about them from presidential candidates. The counter argument, of course, and it might be an insurmountable one, is our founders wanted the justices to serve for life because they wanted them to be free of all political pressures. Now, granted, a lifetime appointment in the 18th century was a lot shorter than it is today because the average lifespan is a lot longer. But I suspect more than the court packing option, or excuse me, I should say the court expansion option, I think we will hear more in the years ahead about term limits, both for judicial and for political reasons.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Dan. So yeah, those were our questions for this month, but I know that we're really looking forward to seeing our audience again next month when we talk about China, Russia, and NATO. So just want to encourage everyone to register for that.
Boy, and that'll be great. It's the first Tuesday in August, which I think is August 2nd.
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken.
August 2nd.
And if we thought we had a lot to pack in on the Roe versus Wade decision this month, Rachel, I can't even imagine how we're going to cover Russia, China, and NATO all in an hour. But you know what? We'll do our best, right?
We really will. I know it's a huge topic, and I know our audience will have tons of good questions for that one too.
Excellent. Well, listen, Rachel, it's great to see you. Enjoy the rest of your July. And I'll see you again at the beginning of, I'll see all of you again at the beginning of August. And I'll be looking forward to it. Thanks so much.